class, this is Professor Be, and today we're going to be introducing you a little bit to Latin America from chapter 1 in the textbook. So you become more familiar and get an overview of everything before we start going into details. Okay, so the first chapter is called Welcome to Latin America. Latin America was born in blood, fire, and conquest, and also slavery. As you will see in the history, the encounter was not very friendly. And there were many consequences to the culture and society because of that beginning. And the conquest and colonization is the only form that is unifying. It's the single history of Latin America that unifies them, conquest and colonization. Latin America has deep roots in indigenous cultures, yet it is very European in language and religion. And you will see how when the Spaniards bring the culture into America, Latin America, it becomes combined with the indigenous cultures to create something brand new, a different culture, different from Europe and different just the indigenous culture is the combination of the two. As you can see from the European side, you have the language, Spanish language, and the religion, which is the Roman Catholic religion. Most Latin Americans live in postmodern megacities. And which ones are the megacities? We have Buenos Aires, Argentina, Sao Paulo, Brazil, and Mexico City in Mexico. And there are about 10 million people in those cities. And then we have Rio de Janeiro, which is in Brazil, Lima, Peru, and Bogota, Colombia, that are not far behind. When we get into the population, which country has the biggest population? We have Brazil, 200 million people. How many people in Brazil? 200 million. You should say it at home, huh? Mexico City has, Mexico has, not the city, the country has 120 million. And Colombia, Argentina, Peru, and Venezuela, second rank between 30 to 50 million people. So Brazil, 200 million, Mexico, 120 million, and Colombia, Argentina, Peru, Venezuela, 30 to 50 million people, okay? So the biggest population is in Brazil. And Mexico comes second. Chile has about 17 million, and the remaining 1/4, a dozen, sovereign nations, have under 10 million people, okay? And the United States, just to compare, is about 323.1 million people. That was recorded in 2016. Okay? The climate is very varied. You have the tropics with no well-defined spring, summer, fall, and winter. Okay? In many of the countries in Latin America, it's not as defined as you find in the East Coast, for example, of the United States, right? Latin America's coastal lowlands are beaches with palms, and the tropical highlands are cooled by the altitude. Often semi-arid, that means semi-dry, part of Latin American history, right? All these lands. Bogota is 8,000 feet above sea level, pretty high. Mexico City is more than 7,000 feet above sea level. And Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, called southern cone of South America, lie mostly outside of the tropics, similar to the parts of the US. And the southern tip is a land of glaciers. So, and Atlantic influences, they say. So I remember being in Argentina, and you will see how different the weather could be in July in the northeastern part of the country as compared to the southern cone of the country. And I'm going to show you some pictures in a little bit, okay? So here's a map, and you can see the major climates, regions of South America. You have the rainforest, the grasslands, and the semi-arid areas. You have the desert, right, in parts of Chile, as you can see here, and highlands, which varies in altitude, okay? The Andes are around this area, right? The mountain range. And you can see grasslands, desert, and temperate climates, as you can see in these areas. And tropical climates in this area. We have like subtropical, humid, areas over here with the deserts. So there's a big variation of weathers all over South America, as you can see here. And for example, I've traveled to Cataratas del Iguazu, which is in the northeastern region of Misiones, Argentina. It's one of the most beautiful places that you visit, so you should go. It's like there are 3 major waterfalls like this in the world. One is the Niagara Falls, which is in the United States, in Canada, in North America. You have Cataratas del Iguazu, which is in South America, and you have Victoria Falls in Africa. So you should put it on your bucket list and really go visit. It's so beautiful. I actually went here. The first time I saw this place, I cried because it was so beautiful. And I couldn't believe that I accomplished my bucket list, right? And you can see my family. This is in July, okay? And we're in Iguazu, and we're wearing like short sleeves, pretty hot, humid, tropical area. And then in the same July month, only like a week after, went to the glaciers of Patagonia, Argentina. Perito Moreno. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. It's on the southern tip of Argentina. You go all the way to the end, and you'll find it glaciares, okay, Perito Moreno. So beautiful. You gotta go see it. It's by a lake, El Lago Argentino, okay? And you can see these beautiful pictures of the glaciers, and it's so amazing. And when it's like cloudy, it looks blue. And when it's sunny, it looks white. So actually, when it's cloudy, it looks like super blue, and you see blue things floating on the lake as you go travel to see it. And it just looks like gem, blue gem. And you can see my family here, super cold. It was freezing, okay, freezing to go see that. But amazing. So you can see in the same month of July, we went to the northeastern tip to see the Iguazu waterfalls, and then a week later we went to the glaciers of Perito Moreno, and they had complete different weathers. As you can see, the climate changes. Latin America is a place of social inequalities and big disparities in wealth. The small countries in Central America, except for Costa Rica, are worse off. Like the countries that have high populations of indigenous people, like Guatemala and Bolivia, are worst off, right, in the disparities. Racially diverse in these countries. As you can see, we have the European, African, and indigenous blood, okay? Guatemala, Bolivia, Peru, and Ecuador. In these countries, you have large populations of indigenous people. For example, Bolivia, where I grew up, is more than 50% of the population is indigenous. And they continue to speak their native languages, and they follow many of their traditions even to this day, right? African genes is dominant in Brazil and on the shores of the Caribbean, because when the indigenous people died, they brought millions of slaves to replace the labor, okay? Between 1500 to 1850, as compared to the U.S. that only brought 523,000 slaves, okay? Cuba got more, and Brazil at least 3.5 million, okay? So you have a big mix of the African culture in those areas. Argentina and Uruguay had Italian immigration in the 1900s. That's why if you go to those regions of Argentina and Uruguay, you have a lot of European descendants, right? In that area, especially the Italian. I remember going to school in Argentina in 4th grade, and most of the classroom had Italian last names. What Latin Americans have in common is the conquest and colonization, like we said. And independence was around the same time, okay? Later, they struggle with similar problems. However, they are not the same in their diversity and their problems too in some ways. So the one unifying force in the history is conquest and colonization. You have to remember that. And if you look back 40 years in Latin America, it was very underdeveloped. There was bad mail system, not connected with, different places. The rural areas were living without electricity or running water. And in the rural areas dominated by landowners and lived in the cities. and they will come back to the rural areas just to make sure that everything was going well. But they bought, their houses in the cities, having their, I guess, haciendas, their ranch and, plantations in the rural areas. The poor people in the countryside were isolated. No malls. The U.S. brand name of consumer goods was very limited because of the high tariffs, the taxes that they had. And they were encouraging local industries, right? No American fast food chains. There was no McDonald's, no Starbucks back in the days, and no overflow of cars, just buses. People would ride buses or taxis. No cell phones until the 1990s, and no credit cards, seat belts, insurance coverage, as you can see. Had not heard of multiculturalism or threats to the rainforest. So they had a lot more nature that wasn't developed, huh? Old school courting circling around the plaza square or supervised dating or courting was still going on 40 years back. The middle class people had living maids from the countryside, and tiny minorities attended universities, and they were mainly studying to become doctors, lawyers, and engineers or architects. So you can imagine back in the days. Do you remember these items? Your parents probably do, huh? 1980s and afterwards, rich people and middle class moved to the high-rise apartments with guarded gates. Even today, if you go to, for example, Buenos Aires, you can see the high-rise apartments with the guard at the front, and that's where the rich people live, in these guarded high-rise apartments. Revolutionary organizations had slogans painted on the walls during this time in the 80s. Marxist guerrillas and nationalist regimes went against the all national forces allied with the U.S. military, which is headed by the liberals. So we have the liberalists and the nationalists, that you will see the two differences at the end of this chapter. So the liberals are allied with the U.S., and the Marxists is looking more into the nationalist interest. The current free market seems to make the rich richer, the middle class more middle class, and the poor poorer. So there's no ladder in the social, like a social climbing, like you see in the United States. It's a lot harder for a poor person to climb all the way to the rich part of the society in the system that they have in Latin America. Wealthier people have lighter skin usually. The poorer people still have darker skin, and a lot of the European descendants still hold power in Latin America, and a lot of the ones who are African and indigenous descendants still serve them. Okay, a lot of inequality. To understand Latin America, we need to understand the history. So we're going to be talking about political ideologies. There are two that keep coming back in the history of Latin America, and one is the classical liberalism, which is just try to learn the term, right? Not for the welfare of the poor. So they only care about the rich and the middle class. It seems limited government, not as involved, free market, and he favored progress over tradition. So you can see where this is going, right? Reason over faith, no religion. Universal over local values. So free global market. Free market over government control. So they're friends of the US and the international capitalism. Okay? And neoliberals, later on, they want globalization, oriented by European or US models. And this made the rich richer. Nationalism, on the other hand, is nations that should rule for themselves. Decolonization, they don't want anybody controlling. No Spain, not the US, as you will see. And around the world, it is neither right or left of the political spectrum. And challenge the free trade, okay? They want to have more like national uniqueness and take care of their own, including the weaker ones. So this includes everybody, the rich, the poor, the middle class, and everybody. So these two ideologies will come back and forth in the history of Latin America, and you will see how it changes a country depending on the leader, who will be a liberalist or a nationalist. And we're going to see in detail in the following chapters.